I'm Chase Larson, and this is the second DJA for Module 2, the quick speak about Chapter 5 in the textbook and the video. And so the first question is, how does the L1 language impact the oral language development of a second language you're learning? And so L1, your first language has a big impact on the second language. So there are about 4 main ways that I've found that it impacts you learning a second language. And so the first reason is pronunciation is very heavily influenced by peers who are learning a new language. So, if you got students who are learning a new language, pronunciation is going to be tough at first, and they need to learn how close you speak, the volume, and things like that. The second is that they'll tend to code switch, which means that they're going to alternate between 2 languages as they speak. So you could have a student who's from Mexico, for example, and when they're speaking to you, they might say some of the words in English, some of the words in Spanish, and that's just because they're still learning the language. And so, they've been speaking that first language that they learned for such a long time that, they're still learning the second language. And the third is the code styling, which means that learners change how they present themselves to show similarities within the cultures. So, you might see students start to change themselves. They'll find similarities between the cultures to help them learn the language. So, for example, if you have a student from Mexico that's in the U.S., they might, you might see them start to find similarities between the 2 cultures, or start to embrace American culture more as they're trying to learn the language. And then the fourth reason is interference. So interference from the first language can affect how they learn the second language. For example, like the phonology and syntax for one language could be totally different from the other. So, they need to learn to cut that out from the language to help them learn English, for example. And then the second question was, what are essential aspects to consider for development of oral communication and sequential language acquisition? So the first essential aspect to consider is, for a teacher, is to recognize continual language learners is essential for content learning. So teachers recognizing the student is still learning a language can really help the teacher know how to teach them the content. So if you're a teacher and you notice that the student is learning the language, you can change the content for them and help them that will benefit them. Second is that oral competency can enhance literacy and vice versa. So if a student is really progressing on how to read in English, then they're going to probably start to speak the language better, and vice versa. So if they're starting to speak it well, then they're going to learn how to get better at reading at it. And then the third is creative activities can help learn language and content. So for students who are still learning the language, it's important to kind of go away from the traditional approach of teaching and give them more creative options that so they can work with others and just learn it in a different way than just textbook or from a PowerPoint or something. And then the fourth reason I have is collaborative exploration of the subject matter aids both oral discourse and content learning. So working with others can really help kids learn the language as they're working with kids who speak the language, or even other kids who are learning the language can help them learn it. And then the last essential aspect I have is all students must be given the chance to speak and be heard. So the best way to learn the language is to speak it, and if you're not giving the kids a chance to speak up in class, they're not going to learn it as fast as they can. So that's my DGA.